Or like 3.
All right, good morning. Can you believe that Thanksgiving is next week? It's coming so fast. I feel like this month always just absolutely disappears. Like it goes so quickly. We'll have class today and Wednesday. And then I put in the schedule from the beginning that I wasn't going to have class next week. So as a campus, we only get Thursday and Friday off, which is a little sad. My kids have the whole week off. So from day one, I scheduled to have the week off. So we won't meet next week, but you probably have classes in your other, is anyone other classes canceling, or you all have your class like normal? So. You don't know yet? Okay, see, I built it in from the beginning. I was like, that's my week to eat. Like I'm not doing it that week. But I hope you get that opportunity. It's always the worst attended week of the year, right? Like everybody is traveling or ready for breaks. So for us, we'll meet Monday, Wednesday this week like normal. And then next week, I won't see you for Thanksgiving. And then when we come back, we'll just have a little bit left of the semester, which is kind of crazy. It's sad a little bit, right? Get attached to all of you. I'm not ready to say goodbye, but we still have like a month, so I don't have to think about that yet. I get sentimental at the end. But I have a few things I want to do today. We're going to kind of wrap up chapter 12. I had that video that I wanted to play for you. That's about 20 minutes of kind of a bunch of different couples going through the process of either childbirth or adoption, kind of acquiring or having a baby. And then I want to talk a little bit about the guest speaker. We'll talk a little bit more about STIs. I have an activity that's probably one of my favorites that we'll do for STIs. I think it makes a really good point. So I'm looking forward to that a little bit later. So that's our plan for today, kind of wrapping up 12, wrapping up 15, and then we'll move on Wednesday. So before I jump into that, any questions, thoughts, comments, anything, just kind of general stuff before we get going on this again? Okay. So we pretty much finished 12, but I have a video that I wanted to play for you that kind of goes through this process of childbirth, right? So we talked about the 511 rule, right? That when somebody has that 511 rule being applicable, that they should go to the hospital, that means they're in active labor. And so I want to show you a video, and it's a couple of different couples going through the process of childbirth. Now, some of them go very smoothly, some have complications. And then one couple is adopting, which I think is another great thing to show, right? Another variety of ways that people can have a child. So lots of different things going on. There's definitely some swearing, some nudity, and I think it's a little bit emotional too. So just to give you all of that ahead of time. But I'll play this for you. And as I said, this is from the movie What to Expect When Expecting. I showed you that little clip of the physical symptoms that Wendy was experiencing, and you'll see her again here along with a couple of other people. And then we can talk about it afterward, some of the things that are realistic or maybe not so realistic. There's definitely kind of a range in here. Let me pause this. So obviously a little bit of a variety, right? So we have all of them heading to the hospital, and then the one couple that's adopting in Ethiopia. But I love that they kind of go through some of this, right? One of them has their water break, which again, we talked about isn't always the most common, right? Sometimes it breaks during labor, but it can obviously break before, which means you need to go to the hospital. I love that he's like watching a show while she's having contractions, just like my partner making us clean the house, right, during contractions. But very common to have a whole variety here, right? They talk about how dilated they are. Some of them are like 8, 9, 10, meaning they're fully dilated and ready to go. See a lot of discussion of that epidural, which we talked a little bit about as a pain, like kind of pain numbing method that a lot of people will undergo. 2 of them, right, push and have a baby naturally, a vaginal birth. And 1, the baby isn't descending down the vaginal canal, so they have to have a C-section. And then you saw her have some complications, which can happen, but she was okay. Again, a lot of the time now, those complications aren't as severe as they maybe were in the past, but it isn't uncommon, right, for people to have things pop up during labor and during delivery. And then you get to see them all afterward as well. So a really, I think a really cool movie about, the process of pregnancy. It's based off of the most popular book related to pregnancy. So again, what to expect when expecting. Any like comments or thoughts or stories, anything at all? So side note, it's not common to sneeze and have the baby be born, right? She makes it look too easy. That's very uncommon. And then Wendy on the other end probably has one of the rougher pregnancies that you can imagine, right? A lot of physical symptoms. It's usually somewhere in the middle, right? I have a close friend who's pregnant right now, and she just hit the second trimester and her morning sickness is finally starting to go away. And she's really excited. She was throwing up like multiple times a day, and now it's starting to like mellow out a little bit. Again, a lot of physical symptoms, birth being obviously quite a journey. I love that they're like, I have a birth plan. I typed it and everything, right? That's nice, right? It's good to have a plan, but oftentimes things don't go according to plan when it comes to childbirth. So you have a plan of what you would like to do, and then you oftentimes have to kind of pivot depending on what happens in the moment. Any thoughts, stories, comments, anything at all here before we move on? I love that he said at the end, that was the worst night of my life, right? I can relate to that a little bit, right? I thought it was like an incredibly like stressful, terrifying like experience. And yet obviously happy at the end, right? So a whole range of emotions, range of outcomes. And then we finished this up. We talked about everything after that related to, after childbirth and so on. So just to kind of tie up that chapter, and then we will move on back to STIs. Right. And obviously we have a nice transition, right? Maybe STI. Okay. So we had our guest speaker last time. I'm sorry. I feel like the bulb is starting to go out because is it dim for you? Okay. I'll complain to them. It takes like 3 weeks to get it replaced. Apparently those bulbs are like $3,000 or something ridiculous like that. So I'll start complaining and we'll hope that they fix it before the end. But we had our guest speaker last time, and I was only here for the first like 25 minutes or so. But any like thoughts or feedback? I watched the whole recording and I posted the recording on Canvas for us. But what did you think of Jasmine in the STI presentation? Was it helpful, not helpful? I think she has a really good balance personally. I've had a couple of people do this presentation, and from what I saw, she is my favorite. Yeah. Right. One, she's younger, which I think is nice for all of you to relate to. But I also feel like she did a really good job of balancing like the information with things like the currents and so on. What do you think? Any thoughts? Yeah, thumbs up. Yeah. What do you think?
Oh yeah, it was just really nice. Like past ones, like I think of Adam the stuff that we really feel.
Yeah.
That it was like clinical almost. Sure. There's just a lot of information that wasn't necessarily like, I don't know, there's a lot to take in, but this was like nice and like through each one you're first like easy to understand, I guess.
Yeah, good. And I saw some of you nodding. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
She was
yeah. And that's important, right? If you're not comfortable talking about it, I think it comes across. And one thing that I love about our health center, they don't take what's a very common stance with STIs is something called the punishment concept of like you have an STI and you're being punished in a way, right? Like for bad behavior or like having, promiscuity or unprotected sex. And they don't take that stance. And that's really important to me. And I think that's really important as well. But that punishment concept that people who get an STI did something wrong and are being punished is so common in our culture, right? Very stigmatized. And she mentioned this to all of you we were talking about herpes. How many people have oral herpes? It's kind of shocking, right? And I don't know if you knew that cold sores are herpes. Most people know that, but just to clarify, but this could be something that you get from a parent or a grandparent who kisses you when you're little, right? And how is that your fault in any way? And yet we still have this stigma around things like herpes, but very common. I mean, my mother-in-law will get outbreaks of cold sores, right? My partner gets outbreaks of cold sores, right? Like clearly got it from her mother, right? This is something that's very easily passed. And technically is considered an STI, even though they are cold sores that you probably developed from a very young age related to no sexual activity whatsoever. So I think it's just really important to have that stance that it doesn't have to be a punishment. These are things that oftentimes people contract, by accident or maybe unknowingly, right? And I want to just talk about a couple of things in here. She obviously didn't cover every STI, so make sure you look over, the chapter in the book and so on. But STIs versus STDs, I just want to talk about that for just a moment. These have gone by a lot of names over the years, right? So over time, we've gone from a lot of different terms. So STDs, previously before that, they were called venereal diseases. So venereal diseases, Veneris was the name of Venus, the Roman god of love. That's where that was thought to come from. They were called social diseases before that. So venereal disease, social disease, sexually transmitted diseases. Now we call them STIs, sexually transmitted infections. So that is the technical name that has been adopted for the last maybe 8 years or so. Infections that are transmitted by sexual contact, right? And the reason we call them infections is not all of them actually have symptoms, which she talked a lot about. A lot of these are very silent, right? You might not even know that you have them, right? And maybe you have a flare up at times, but these are things that can be very overt and hidden. And they've been called an epidemic, right? There's a lot of STIs. The prevalence of these is slightly frightening, right? If you ever look into this, 1 in 4 sexually active people between the ages of 15 and 24 have an STI. 1 in 4, 25% of people between the ages of 15 and 24 have an STI, right? So that's why it's so important to use some of those different birth control and contraceptive methods that we talked about weeks ago, like condoms and dental dams and so on, right? Protecting yourself, right? There's a lot of prevalence of STIs in our culture, especially among people between 15 to 24, people who are a little bit younger and very sexually active. So risky sexual behavior, we have a lot of increased use of oral contraceptives. People have this interesting thought. It's a very common stereotype, well, I'm on the pill, so I'm safe, right? You're shaking your head. You're no, right? No, not true, right? That might help you avoid getting pregnant, but it's not going to help you avoid getting an STI or using a condom ineffectively, right? If you're not using it correctly, right, you might avoid getting pregnant, but you might not avoid getting an STI. So it's really important to have good awareness of the different things that will prevent the spread of these, not having guilt or embarrassment. It's really important to have these conversations. As awkward as they are, you probably want to know if a partner of yours has an STI before you engage in any kind of sexual activity with them, right? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that today, but it's not the easiest conversation to have. And there are there are wild apps and message systems where you can let someone know anonymously, which is just slightly odd in a way. But having these conversations, it is important. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it just depend.
It depends. And so oftentimes people will, if you have no symptoms, so for example, oral herpes, right? You are drastically less likely to pass it on when there are no symptoms. So for example, when my partner gets a cold sore, she just won't kiss me until it's gone, right? That's my least favorite week of the year, right? But that's her way of not giving it to me. We've been together 20 years and I've never, knock on something, right? I've never contracted it from her because whenever she has an outbreak, she's careful. And so you could still pass it without an active outbreak or symptoms, but it's much less likely than when there is something physically present. I don't know if she said this, somebody I used to have come in all the time talked about flashlights. Did she talk about flashlights? I didn't hear it in her thing, but the person who always used to come said pull out your phone and turn on your flashlight. And before you have sex with somebody, check out what you're going to touch, right? With your flashlight, which I always thought was hilarious. If you can see something physically there, then your risk is drastically higher. Right. So if you see genital warts or you see sores or you see any kind of bumps, right, then obviously you're going to want to either refrain or protect yourself in a much better way. Right. So I always love that suggestion. Open your flashlight app on your phone and take a quick look at whatever you're about to have sex with. Right. Again, just taking precautions is the idea. And even when you take precautions, you aren't always 100% protected. And I have an activity that we're going to do. And like I said, a little while ago, this is one of my favorites because it's awkward. But I love it anyway. So I'm going to make you do something awkward today. You're all going to have sex with each other. Are you excited? Right? Nervous, excited. So what we're going to do, we're going to do an activity called the STI handshake. Okay. So I love this activity. So what I've done is I went on the Ventura Public County Health website and got statistics. And they're a few years old, so it's 2018, so pre-COVID. But I have the statistics for STIs in our county, right? Which STIs are the most common? Again, it's about 1 in 4. And I put those on cards for you. And so I'm going to hand these cards out. And this is not personal. This is completely random. If I give you a card that says you have gonorrhea, it's not because I don't like you, right? It's just completely random, all right? So just keep that in mind. So what's going to happen in a minute is I'm going to give you a card. Please don't share it with anyone. Okay, this is your card to keep for the moment. You're going to walk around the room and you're going to have sex with 5 different people. You can choose whoever you want. It's your turn to experiment, whatever you want to do, right? 5 different people, and the way that you're going to have sex with them is by shaking them. So that's your symbolic act. That's as far as we're going, right? But it's enough, right? And then what I want you to do after you shake hands, you're going to reveal whether or not you had an STD or an STI. And so that is number 1, right? It's highlighted in orange. So if it says you are STD or STI free, then you'll tell your partner, hey, I have nothing. If they have nothing, then you both walk away unscathed and you move on to the next person, right? If it says, right, there's a lot of STI free, you have chlamydia, right? So if you have chlamydia and you shake hands with somebody, they now have chlamydia. Okay, so you don't have to write it down, but just remember. So if you start out, like, for example, I start out STI free, but I shake hands with somebody who has chlamydia. Next time I shake hands, I pass on that chlamydia. Okay, does that make sense? So if you get an STI from somebody, you pass it on to the next person you have sex with. Okay. So that's this part here. Ignore number 2 for now. Okay, so just number 1. So when I give you this card, just look at it. When everybody has a card, I'll have you go around and shake hands with 5 people. Keep a mental note of what you have or don't have, and we'll talk about that a little bit after. Is that a question? Yeah. Okay. No.
With like 5 people.
Yeah. Okay.
As soon as it touched the water, it would like turn bright blue or something.
Yeah. I think I have seen that before. Yeah, as you're describing it sounds familiar. Right. This isn't this is a little less scientific, but I think it usually makes a good point. Right. And so we'll see how it goes. It's different every time. I never know what to expect. So again, this is part 1. When you're done, I do have a couple of, I love this picture, right? I have a couple of questions I want you to answer. So when you've had sex with 5 people, feel free to sit down. There is Nancy Kaiser over here. Like you need to like cleanse yourself afterwards. But I'm going to hand these out. And again, please remember that this is completely like random. I'm just picking one top.
It's 9 in the morning, shenanigans.
But my body will know. And again, don't share it. Okay, everybody have a part? Oh, did I see you? So sorry. So you'll go out to somebody, you're going to shake hands with them, and then you're going to let them know what you had or didn't have. And if they had an STI, you now have it. So for example, if you both had herpes, you still walk away with just herpes, right? Just, okay? You now have both. And they pick your herpes. Okay, that makes sense? All right, so everyone's on 5 people.
I get pretty words, so you've done it.
Is it okay? Lucky you. All right. So we're going to talk about this, of course. Answer these 3 questions. What were you started? What do you have now? And then any reactions or thoughts. And then go ahead and pass the card that we'll start over for the next. Or not. So go ahead and answer first for you.
Like how is this gonna work? I will have. Oh.
Or do I have everyone's card?
I can just spell these. No.
Answer these 3. So number 1, what did you start with? Number 2, what did you end with? And then number 3, if you have any like reactions or thoughts or comments, and we'll talk about it. No, it's okay. If you spell them wrong, that doesn't matter. We'll talk about it in just a minute.
Herpes, gonorrhea.
Gonorrhea. Yeah, but I also.
It's someone that needs spelled.
H-O-N-O-R.
There you go. Gonorrhea. Gonorrhea. Let me go back to the other ones.
Wait, what about? Oh.
So give me just like another minute or so, then I want to talk about it.
What's STDs? Well, we're STD systems. Yeah. Wait, this one. It's a fun. My reaction. Nobody.
Can I ask, like, how many did about?
For what?
Like, how many, like, did I win?
Did you win? Here, we'll talk about it in a second. Okay, so if you're not done writing, that's totally fine. How many of you, by show of hands, started out STD, STI free? Look around, how many of you, right? Almost all of you, only a handful of you started out with an STD or STI. Did anyone end STD, STI free? Oh, I'm so sorry, right? I'm so sorry. Make sure your hands get tighter right today. So how many of you ended with 1 by show of hands? 2? That feels lucky at the moment, right? 3. Oh my, 4. Anyone have more than 4? 5, I'm assuming, right? 5, you one lucky person got all 5, right? You got one from everybody. I'm so sorry. So most of you started out STD, STI free. This is assuming no conversation, no protection. You shook hands blindly. You acquired everything because you did nothing to protect yourself. Any thoughts? I mean, do you think this is realistic? Is it frightening? Is it what? Any thoughts at all about this? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
It can be very realistic, not for everyone, obviously, but it definitely happens. Like,
Yeah.
even in the clip you showed where she got pregnant on accident,
Yeah.
like this could have been the scenario. They
Yeah.
were like drunk in the dark.
Mhm. And it's slightly frightening to think that when you have sex with somebody, you have sex with everyone they've ever had sex with before you, right? In a sense, right? So if they've acquired an STI or an STD from someone previously, you are at risk of acquiring it, right? Especially if you do absolutely nothing. You didn't have a conversation, you didn't use any kind of protection, you didn't do any of those things, right? And so just to kind of drive that point home again, how many of you, one more time, started out STD, STI free? I mean, the vast majority of you, I only handed out like 4 or 5 cards, I think 5 cards that had STDs or STIs on them, right? And that's the prevalence of our county. Again, about 1 in 4, there's about 20 of you. And so that's right around the same range. Yeah. Herpes by far, right? Herpes is just universally very, very common. And then what she talked about, gonorrhea and chlamydia and syphilis are also pretty. All right, so now we're going to do part 2. And this one's a little more complicated, but the results should be quite different. So your slate is cleared. Okay, if you had 5, 4, 3, 2, whatever STDs, STIs, you are now free again. Very exciting. Wipe that slate clean. And I imagine it was interesting too, listening to some of you like saying I have gonorrhea, right? Like I could almost see like the intimidation of just saying it was a little bit intimidating to have to say, and I felt bad handing you the cards, right? Like I'm so sorry. I wanted to apologize as I gave some of your cards. But your slate is clear. I'm going to hand these out again, and you go back to whatever it says on line number 1. That's going to be what you start with this time around. And again, you're going to have sex with 5 people. You can choose the same people, or you can choose different people, whatever you want. You can have sex with whoever you would like, shaking their hands again. And then this time, whether or not you contract an STD or STI is determined by line number 2 on your card. Now, line number 2 says stuff like you didn't use any protection. If your partner had an STD, you now read. Okay. You decide to have a conversation before having sex, so you don't acquire an STI. You have a conversation, say 1, you used protection, so you don't contract one. You used a condom, but it broke, right? So you contract one. These are common scenarios that people might encounter. A lot of them are conversations or using protection, or maybe like the protection failed. Okay, so you walk up to somebody, shake hands, and then depending on what happens on your card, okay, so they follow their rules, you follow your rules. So if yours says you don't acquire it, then you're safe. You don't get whatever they have. If theirs says you get it, then they would acquire yours. Okay, so just follow your rule. Then what I want you to do is mentally remember what you have, and you're going to switch cards with that individual. That way you get a variety of different circumstances. And now you're only paying attention to number 2 because you're remembering what you had on line number 1. Does that make sense? So when you're done, you'll switch cards, mentally remember what you have or don't have. And now you're going to follow the new rule on the card that you have, but you're ignoring line number 1.
We switched cards like 5 times.
Yes, so that will give you 5 different opportunities to have a variety of different scenarios, but you're going to remember what you had on line number 1. So ignore line 1 after you switch cards, just focusing on line 2.
So the number 2 you get doesn't count.
Yes, so you're going to use that the first time,
So,
and then after you shake hands, you'll switch
oh,
cards. I think it'll make sense when you go to do it, but just follow your rule number 2, and then switch when you're done. And you remember what you had or don't have. I would expect these results to be very, very, very different. We'll see. Okay, so I'm gonna hand these out. And again, don't tell anyone. Oh, big difference, roughly.
What number 2 says doesn't affect if.
So follow your rules. Okay, so for example, right, my card, right, says I have herpes, right? So my card says I have herpes. If I shake hands with you, right? And then it says I didn't use any protection. So if she had herpes, or well, not maybe that's what I had, right? If she had gonorrhea, but I didn't use any protection, so I would acquire her gonorrhea. Okay, and then now I gotta remember that I have herpes and gonorrhea. We switch cards, and then the next card says I use protection, I don't contract. That's my new rule.
You switch
For
with
the
the
next-
next person.
Yep, so switch cards with every person, but ignore line number 1, just focusing on 2 once you switch. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, all right, so go ahead, find 5 people, and then I'll put up the questions for you for part 2. Yeah.
I have already, I don't know. Well, I can see.
Sorry, it's a little more confusing, a little more involved, but hopefully. I figured it out. So we answered these 3, right? What did you start with? What did you end with? Was this different? How was it different? And which one do you think is more realistic? I'll give you a couple of minutes and then we will talk about it together. If you want to pass your cards forward, I will collect those and then we're all STI free and then. At least as far as the cards. first and last name is on there somewhere. You are going to turn on the TV in a few minutes, so get points for the activity. Give you just another minute or so. All right, let's talk about it. If you're still writing, that's totally fine. How many of you started out STI free by show of hands? Again, look around, quite a few of you. Did anyone end STI free? That is a huge difference, right? How many of you ended with one by show of hands? Anyone end with two? Nobody had two or more? Did anyone have more than two? Somebody really unlucky. Okay, so out of all of you, only a handful of you ended with one, and a lot of you ended with none, right? It's a huge difference from the first time around. Yeah.
Well, I started with one, but I ended one with the same one.
Right.
Great change.
Yeah, right. So you started with it and you ended with it, right? So the difference here is obviously you did things to protect yourself, right? You either used a protection method. Sometimes they failed, right? That was a couple of things that was on one of the cards. Your method failed or you used it improperly. You had a conversation or you just didn't acquire it, right? Not every time are you going to acquire something, but it is definitely possible, right? Which do you think is more realistic, the first one or the second one? How many of you think the first one is more realistic? The second one? You're like, I really hope the second one, right? The second one I think is more realistic. Otherwise, our numbers would be ridiculous, right? If we didn't use things, if we didn't have conversations, we didn't do things to protect ourselves, everyone would have multiple STIs. It would just be a gauntlet out there, right? But it isn't, because people do things to protect themselves. They wear condoms, right? They have conversations, they get tested, right? They do all these different methods that we had on our cards. And so hopefully that kind of drives home the point of how important those things are. If you don't protect yourself, remember the result from the first one, right? Again, 1 in 4 people have an STI. And so if you're not careful, right, it is possible to acquire multiple STIs. So hold on to that for a minute. I will collect it from you at the end. But just at the end of this chapter, I want to talk a little bit about HIV and AIDS just for a minute, just because I know that Jasmine didn't. But some things about preventing STIs, right? The number one way to prevent them is abstinence, right? And not having any kind of like physical intimacy. But if you aren't willing to be abstinent, right, there are other things you can do. Being disease-free and monogamous, right? The less partners you have, obviously, the less your risk is going to be. Monogamous means being like faithful and loyal to one person, one partner, right? So if you have one partner and you're only engaging in sex with that one partner, your risk is going to go down, especially if they are STI free and you are, right? Then you have a very minimal risk. Assessing your risk status and your partner's risk status. Have medical examinations, get tested, right? That's one of the options for the assignments. You can go get tested. You don't have to tell me the results, but knowing your status going into any kind of intimacy with another person is important. Using condoms and using them effectively, or dental dams if you're performing oral sex. Avoid having activity with multiple partners. Inspecting your partner's genitals. There's the flashlight again, right? Make sure you're looking at, if you see something visibly there, your risk is drastically higher, right? So it is important. Washing yourself, being clean. That's not going to prevent you from getting an STI, but good hygiene goes a long way, right? And so having cleanliness can prevent infection more than STIs, but it also can be an important part. Having those conversations, using protection, just to kind of put that out there one last time. All right. And any other, like I said, I want to back up and talk about one other thing, but any other questions or comments or thoughts, anything else related to the handshakes or what we've talked about so far? So the last thing I want to cover in this chapter, just because I might ask you some stuff about it on the exam, I know Jasmine didn't cover it, is to talk a little bit about HIV and AIDS. I used to bring in a guest speaker, really cool guy by the name of Doug, really prominent guy in Ventura County. But since COVID, he hasn't been as willing to come out do this, which is too bad. I tried to get him to do it virtually, but he didn't want it out there in the world. But this is a really probably one of the most catastrophic of the STIs that we're talking about. Now, a lot of them are silent. This one doesn't tend to be so much, but I want to talk about AIDS versus HIV, how you can acquire it, and then a few other little bits of information. So AIDS, right, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, right, it was something that started to be noticed in about the 1980s. At the time, it was called gay cancer, right? Gay-related immunodeficiency or gay cancer was like the nickname for it because it tended to primarily affect gay men. Now, that is no longer the case, right? This isn't just a gay or homosexual disease. This is something that can affect anyone and everyone. But it did start out primarily affecting like the gay male population, which is where it got a lot of its stigma and a lot of the mentalities around it. A lot of gay men died from this in the 80s and 90s. And now we have much better treatments, much better awareness, but it does tend to affect people on a more universal scale, not just gay men, but anyone is vulnerable to this. So the virus is called HIV, human immunodeficiency virus. That is the virus that sits in your system, right? And over time, it can escalate to AIDS. So AIDS is when it has become the illness that has come forward. It's destroying the ability of your immune system to fight disease. But the virus that you would acquire is HIV, right? So HIV sits in your system. It can sit there for years and years and years without becoming AIDS. AIDS is the active version of it. But it is acquired through 4 different bodily fluids. And this would be a wonderful short answer question for you. What are the 4 fluids? And there's one that is not up here, and it is universally accidentally listed, right? Saliva is not one of the 4, right? And that is something that it's important to remember. These are the 4: blood, semen, vaginal fluid, and breast milk, not saliva. The only way that you would get this through saliva is if you were like open mouth kissing somebody, right, and exchanging saliva, and you had an open cut in your mouth and they had an open cut in their mouth where you were both actively bleeding. Now, if you're actively bleeding from your mouth, you probably shouldn't be open mouth kissing another individual, period. But if you were doing that, in theory, it would be possible to get it that way. But even if you consume, this is probably the worst thought I can think of, if you consumed a gallon of somebody else's saliva, you wouldn't get this, right? And it's just not something that is transmitted that way. It doesn't tend to live outside of the body very long at all. It has a very short window of life outside of the body. It lives in these fluids. So you can acquire this through blood. It's probably the most common way that people get this. You can acquire it through semen. You can acquire it through vaginal fluid and through breast milk. And so we oftentimes test people who are pregnant to find out if they have HIV or AIDS. It's a very common, if not universal procedure, right? So right as you're trying to get pregnant, or because we went through assisted reproductive stuff, they tested us before. And then once you are pregnant, they test you again. Because if it comes out that you do have HIV, it's going to shape the way that your birth can happen. And it's also going to shape the way that you potentially feed that baby. So if we know that you have HIV, we would likely do a C-section to avoid that baby going through the vaginal canal. And we would avoid you having any kind of breastfeeding in order to minimize those chances. And so knowing this information can be really helpful, especially for childbirth, but saliva is not one of the fluids. Yeah.
Is there a reason why it was mostly affecting gay men in the 80s, or is it mostly?
Because of semen, right? So what happens, so anal sex is probably one of the riskiest sexual behaviors because the anal canal, right, is very susceptible to tears, right? Especially when you're inserting something into it, right? Traditionally, that is something that things are passed out of rather than going into, right? That was the design of the body, but it does have a lot of dense receptors for pleasure. The problem is when you're having anal sex with another person, oftentimes the friction can cause small tears, and those small tears are bleeding, even if it's slight. And that semen is getting in, the blood and semen are mixing together. So by nature of the activity of anal sex, that's what made gay men so at risk, so much more at risk than other populations. So that was really the combination that made it so deadly for so many gay men, right? I mean, and it obviously can affect, you know, people, heterosexual couples and lesbian couples. It can affect anyone, but that's how it started and really where it gained its prevalence. It's a great question. Any other questions or thoughts or anything? This is a scary disease, right? Like, and we've all been taught to have it be scary from, like, I mean, I can remember all the way back to when I was little, this being scary, but I was born in the 80s. So I grew up during like when this was like very prevalent. But we have so many great treatments now. They're ridiculously expensive, but we are able to manage this in a much better way than we could previously. There are a lot of people who live with HIV and AIDS who are fine, right? And who have it at a very low load where they won't even pass it to a partner. But it is expensive in order to receive those treatments. So a few other pieces of information. There's something with AIDS and HIV called the window period, which makes this a difficult one to test for. So what happens is after you have unprotected sex or an exposure of some kind through blood or semen or vaginal fluid or breast milk, it takes a period of time before this builds up in your system, right? So it doesn't happen right away. What happens is it has to pass a certain level of viral load in order to be detected by a test, right? So the amount of HIV present in your blood, right, has to reach a certain capacity before it's detected by a test. And so this window, it takes a little bit of time, right? So the window is 2.5 weeks to 6 months of time. I'll write that up. So 2.5 weeks to 6 months. That's the viral window or the window period. And so let's say you have unprotected intercourse with somebody and you get tested 2 weeks later, just, okay, I just want to make sure I didn't get an STI from this individual. It might not show up yet. It might not show up all the way till 6 months later, right? And that is kind of one of the tricky things with this. It has to reach a critical point, a critical viral load in your system in order to be detected by a test. And so that's where a lot of people run into issues like, oh, I got tested, I'm safe, I'm fine. But it might take up to 6 months for it to appear in your blood work. And as I mentioned, we have some really wonderful treatments for this now. The symptoms that people tend to experience when they have HIV are things like fever, fatigue, get rashes, infections. It lowers your immune system. And so what happens is inevitably people die of something small like a cold or certain types of diseases because their immune system can't fight it off. We measure how intense this is by the number of T cells that you have. So people have T cells, which are your immune system cells that fight off different like viruses and bacteria. And when your T cells drop below a certain number, you're very vulnerable to any kind of illness. And that is what eventually tends to be deadly about this disease, is your immune system can no longer fight things off. Now, these different treatments, these antiretroviral therapies, or ARTs, as they're sometimes called, what they do is they help to increase the count of T cells. So they fight that lowered immune system response by increasing your T cells, making you less vulnerable. It also decreases the viral load in your blood. There are a lot of people who have HIV who have so faint of a viral load that they wouldn't pass it to another person. There's no way that they could because it's not even detected in their blood. And so these drugs can cost an average of like $10,000 or more a month for some of them. All right, they're becoming more and more available. It used to be that you took almost like a whole Ziploc bag, like a quart-sized Ziploc bag of drugs per month in order to keep this at bay. Now we're down to like a couple of pills. Right? This is something that has gained an incredible amount of research and resources, but they are very, very expensive. So people who have a lot of money are able to keep this load down and protect themselves. And people who don't tend to have it progress and be at more of a risk of acquiring AIDS from the HIV that they acquire. So again, a scary disease, a scary illness, but we do have a lot of treatments. And this is something that you can very much, protect yourself from by minimizing your risk to and exposure to other people's blood, right? Or again, semen, vaginal fluid, and breast milk, which is why we always test when somebody's pregnant, just to make sure that we are minimizing that risk as much as possible. It was a scary moment, by the way. Like I've always in my mind, I was like, oh, I've had one partner. I'm totally not going to have an STI or an STD. And I remember when we were going through our IVF stuff, when I decided to go through a round, they're like, okay, we have to test you for all the STIs. And I didn't even think anything of it. I was like, okay, they took the blood and I waited. And then I went to go get the results and I had a moment. I was like, oh my God, what if, right? Like I had all this stress and all this anxiety. I'd never given it a second thought. Like I've always been careful, monogamous, and at very, very low risk. And thankfully everything came back fine, but it's a scary thing to be tested for, right? But again, a lot of hope now compared to the past. And we're just doing more and more research. So hopefully it'll only get better and better as we move forward. Okay. All right. Any other questions or thoughts? Anything here? So we've wrapped up 12, right? We wrapped up 13 or 15, right? So our next topic that we will go to, if you're looking at the syllabus, is what we will do on Wednesday is we'll move on to chapter 16, which is varieties of sexual expression. So we'll talk about some of the paraphilias and fetishes and things that sometimes people are engaging in. You're like, yes, you're excited. I like it. Right, we'll talk about fetishes on Wednesday. I also want to remind you, if you're looking at the syllabus, that part 2 of your assignment is due Wednesday by 11:59 p.m. I purposefully did this before Thanksgiving break because I want you to have a break, right? I can't control your other classes, but I don't want to give you homework over break. So it is due Wednesday by 11:59 p.m. Be thinking about it, be going on those field trips, doing those assignments. You're picking one other option from the menu, a different one than last time. A lot of people this time around have talked about art projects, some really cool ones last time, right? That were a lot of fun. But feel free to pick any of those options. If you have another idea, run it by me. I'll hang out for a few minutes since we're done a couple of minutes early. So the slides for 16 are already up, and I will see you all on Wednesday, and we'll keep going with the next chapter. Wash your hands as you leave, right? All that sexual activity, clean your hands before you go to it. Oh, and make sure you turn in your paper. Thank you so much.